She stared at the email subject line twice before she let out a shaky breath. Heartbreaking news for John Stamos. Normally, celebrity headlines herald red carpet triumphs or surprise engagements. But this time the words felt heavy, tense, ominous. Within moments, the carefully curated world of one of Hollywood's most enduring heartthrobs was about to tilt into uncharted territory. John Stamos, the man millions know as Uncle Jesse from Full House, has always mastered the art of sunshine and slow dances, but even the most polished actor can't guard against life's hardest blows. His career soared in the late 80s and 90s. He was the babyface drummer in Long Beach's hottest fictional band. He snagged roles in primetime dramas, and he starred in music videos alongside Madonna. He's exuded charm in sitcoms and serious intensity in indie films, but beyond the lens and lights, he's also lived a life rich with relationships. A childhood defined by a close-knit California family, friendships forged on the set of TGIF shows, and romances that briefly flickered in tabloids. Throughout it all, his public persona has remained reassuringly constant, anchored by that trademark wavy hair and warm, mischievous grin. Yet life behind the scenes is never quite as seamless as primetime reruns. The email in her inbox came from a well-placed EVP source, a production assistant turned music video coordinator who'd learned whispers in the studio lot. John Stamos' father, an immensely private man who lived in Laguna Beach, had been rushed to the hospital the night before. The assistant had seen ambulances, heard frantic phone calls between producers, and felt the ripple of confusion wash over cast and crew when the word spread that Stamos' dad was fighting for his life. She scrolled through the text. "I don't know more, but I know John Stamos just left the set of his upcoming Netflix special and sped down the freeway with his wife." It was a breadcrumb of reality in a sea of speculation, but enough to ignite a firestorm. Social media would soon churn through every possible detail. Was it a heart attack? A stroke? Who was by his side? Heartbreaking news for John Stamos. The phrase echoed like a heartbeat in her mind. Even as she thought it, she tried to steady her own reaction. After all, she wasn't a distant celebrity reporter. She had covered dozens of human interest stories, families shattered by sudden losses, survivors grappling with fragile hope. But this one felt personal somehow, perhaps because Stamos had spent his life radiating humanity. From hosting children's concerts for Sick Kids Foundation to co-founding organizations that mentor at-risk youth, he built a public image not just of a glossy TV star, but of someone who genuinely cared. If the worst happened today, how would the world reconcile that beacon of light with irrevocable grief? In the studio corridors where she now stood, the glossy posters on the walls seemed suddenly surreal. Promotional stills of Stamos on a motorcycle, riding into a blazing sunset of cinematic perfection. How far removed that scene felt from the humming tension simmering in his family's hospital room. She tapped her pen against her notebook. There was a story here, yes, but it wasn't about TV ratings or fan theories. It was about a son poised to face the potential loss of his anchor, the man who taught him to ride a bike, who drove him to auditions in the beat-up minivan that jostled through Hollywood's hills. Her editor would demand every available fact. She'd have to sift through carefully worded studio statements, cross-reference hospital bulletins, and guard against false rumors that spread like wildfire online. For now, though, she needed silence to honor the gravity of a situation that 100 headline writers would soon reduce to clickbait. That crushing phrase, heartbreaking news for John Stamos, wasn't just a hook. It was real life barreling into the frame, reminding us that behind every star is a person whose world can shift in an instant. She folded her notebook shut and glanced at the exit sign above the door, took a deep breath, and decided this story would be told with care, not as a frenzy, but as a reminder that compassion remains the most powerful narrative of all. John arrived at the emergency room doors with his trademark easygoing smile replaced by taut concern. He wore a simple navy sweater, the kind he might have tossed on for errands, yet every line of his jaw spoke urgency. Security led him past a cluster of onlookers, family friends, studio representatives, a handful of close colleagues who had dropped everything to support him. Inside, the antiseptic coolness was a stark contrast to the blazing California sun he'd just left behind. A nurse in scrubs nodded at him, eyes sympathetic. He stopped beside the gurney, holding a frail figure wrapped in a blue blanket, hooked to 4 drips and monitors. His father's breathing was steady but shallow. As John reached out, gently clasping his father's hand, he lowered his voice to a hushed whisper. I'm here, Dad. Just rest. Nurses glanced away respectfully, letting the moment unfold with the dignity it deserved. In the hallway, a room of muted chatter paused as colleagues exchanged glances, many recalling John's father waving at cameras decades earlier, the proudest dad in the bleachers as his son chased auditions and TV dreams. That memory of his father cheering higher than anyone at a local talent show flashed in John's mind now. In a single snapshot of love and support that had underpinned everything he'd built. The hospital wing felt suspended between hope and fear. Monitors beeped in measured pulses, reminding everyone that life, so vibrant on television sets, could hinge on the slimmest of margins. A soft knock announced the arrival of a senior physician, clipboard in hand and professional calm in her steps. Mr. Stamos, she said gently, not wanting to startle him. Your father suffered a mild stroke overnight. We stabilized him and are running further tests. He's remarkably strong, but there's still a risk of complications in the next 24 to 48 hours. John nodded, absorbing each word with the focus of someone learning his lines for a critical scene. But this was no scripted moment. The stakes were heartbreakingly genuine. The doctor's steady explanation faded into background noise as John's mind flickered through memories. Fishing trips at dawn, chemistry experiments in the garage, father-son talks about integrity over instant fame. He sank into a chair beside the bed, eyes never leaving the rhythm of those hospital-grade lights. His wife hovered nearby, hand on his shoulder, offering silent comfort. Reports had come flooding in, fans posting prayers online, co-stars sending text messages full of emojis and heart signs. Yet none of that warmth could quite soothe the hollow space in his chest. Fame was comfortable. This vulnerability was new territory. He remembered the thousands of times he'd played Uncle Jesse for laughing children, soothed frightened toddlers during tours, even comforted grieving parents at charity events. Now, he needed comfort himself, and he leaned on the same father who had once leaned on him. Outside, social media feeds exploded with speculation. Headlines flashed. Full House star races to hospital. John Stamos faces family crisis. Every click-hungry writer spun tales of drama, wondered aloud if he'd cancel upcoming filming, settle future endorsements. But amid the panic, supporters rallied too. Posts urging calm, sharing stories of stroke survival, linking to fundraiser pages. This duality echoed his own inner churn, a battle between the frantic pace of Hollywood and the patient pulse of real life, where hope grows in quiet breaths, not sound bites. Friends close to the family recalled a different John. The son who learned to tie fishing lures with his father's calloused hands. The teenager who practiced lines in a mirror with his dad coaching every tone. Those recollections were now offered up as balm to fans craving perspective. In living rooms across the world, viewers who grew up watching him revisit these shared memories, leaving comments like, I'm praying for you, John, and your dad raised a good man. Their pronouncements, sincere though well-meaning, felt distant from the sterile corridors where he sat. Hours stretched into an anxious vigil. John's inbox pinged with cryptic messages from agents and producers, urgent queries about filming schedules, insurance protocols, and possible reshoots. He realized that in show business, every personal setback collides with professional deadlines. Yet he sat still, prioritizing one handshake with mortality over any camera setup. In that pregnant silence before dawn, he pressed his father's hand and reminded himself that this story, heartbreaking as it was, deserved telling with compassion rather than clickbait urgency. He stepped out into the corridor, its harsh fluorescent lights beckoning him farther from the room where his father lay fighting for each breath. John's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Production assistants checking on call times, stylists reminding him of tomorrow's press junket, his manager urging him to issue a statement. He silenced it gently, pressing it flat against his chest as if channeling strength through its aluminum curves. In that moment, the world he'd built, a busy set, glossy premieres, adoring fan mail, felt suddenly fragile, like a house of cards trembling in a gale. He inhaled deeply, tasting antiseptic and exhaustion, then exhaled a slow promise. First his father, then the rest. He returned to his father's side to find his mother, her stoic form softened by worry, holding vigil. She glanced up, offering a small, tired smile. John nodded to her, then reached out for his dad's other hand. "Remember that fishing trip in Santa Barbara?" he whispered, voice rough. "You taught me to tie my first knot." The line between memory and present blurred as monitors beeped in steady reassurance. His father stirred, eyelids fluttering like a weary bird waking at dawn. In that tiny movement, John sensed a flicker of hope, a reminder that life's most urgent scripts aren't written in marquee lights, but in bedside whispers. A nurse appeared then, clipboard in hand, offering technical updates with practiced calm. John absorbed each word: lab results, medication adjustments, small victories in tiny increments, before thanking her and watching her retreat. He felt a surge of admiration for the staff, who treated his father like a fragile cargo worth every ounce of care. In their hushed professionalism, he glimpsed the best of humanity: steadfast, compassionate, endlessly vigilant. It was a stark contrast to the paparazzi that waited outside with telephoto lenses and hunger for scandal. These corridors pulsed not with headlines, but with hope-driven heartbeats. Back in the waiting area, he sank into a vinyl chair and finally let the tremor in his hands surface. His wife joined him, folding her hands into his and pressing their foreheads together for a brief moment of shared grief. They exchanged no words, none were needed. Tears pooled behind his sunglasses as he recalled the day his father scraped him off a skateboard and patched his scraped knee with a Band-Aid that bore a Superman logo. That same father had steered him through Hollywood's tricky tides, urging him toward authenticity, reminding him that every role, no matter how small, deserved integrity. Now, authenticity demanded raw vulnerability instead of practiced charm. His manager's voice, cautious, urgent, cracked over his phone moments later. "We need a public statement. Can we get a holding message?" John nodded, though no one could see him. "Tell them I appreciate everyone's prayers. My family's in the best hands, and I'm focused on Dad." He sent the text, mindful of the balance between privacy and empathy that modern celebrity demanded. With a single breath, he released the obligation to perform even in sorrow. This was real life, unscripted, and he vowed to honor it with truth rather than spin. He rose, brushing imaginary dust from his jeans, and returned to the room where his father lay. He adjusted the blanket around his shoulders and began reading passages from a worn paperback, lines about redemption and love that once resonated on his mother's lap in their family home. The words felt alive under hospital lights, weaving a tapestry of comfort between father and son. As he read, his father's breathing steadied further, each exhale a small victory. John paused to let the silence speak, letting the rise and fall of that steady rhythm fill the space. Before leaving for a brief rest, he knelt and pressed his forehead to his father's knee. "You taught me how to be brave," he murmured. "Now watch me keep that lesson alive." He stood, smoothing his sweater and feeling the weight of legacy settle around him more like a cloak than a chain. In that moment, he realized heartbreak would always have a place in life's narrative, but it need not define the final act. With renewed resolve, he stepped into the hallway once more, ready to face cameras with grace, headlines with honesty, and the unwritten pages of tomorrow with quiet courage. He walked back to the waiting area, weariness tugging at his shoulders, yet tempered by a flicker of relief. The intercom crackled with the next shift update, announcing that nurses would check vital signs. John glanced at his watch. Time for that statement. He paused by a water cooler, poured himself a glass, and felt the metal cup chill his palm. The sterile water seemed symbolic of his resolve. Clear, unvarnished, essential. He opened his phone and read the draft text from his publicist. "My father is stable and receiving excellent care. I thank everyone for their love and ask for privacy at this time." He knew this message had to walk the tightrope between gratitude and boundaries. With a steady thumb, he pressed send. Moments later, replies pinged, supportive emojis, offers to pray, virtual bouquets of roses. Yet another inbox brimmed with interview requests, a producer eager to tie the news into upcoming projects, lawyers reminding him of contractual obligations. John exhaled, turning off notifications. For now, he would guard this moment for family alone. He leaned against the corridor wall, picturing the fishing hook his father once taught him to tie, A simple loop, but it held firm under pressure. He needed that same single loop of focus to hold him together. By mid-morning, he permitted himself a quick retreat to a small lounge near the nurse's station. The room was silent except for the hum of a lone television set tuned to a news channel. The anchor's voice cut in. "Heartbreaking news for John Stamos," blared the cheerin. They recapped the night's vigil, a montage of flashing ambulances and distraught cast members. He watched for a moment, noting his own face lined with concern. But then he rose, the distant echo of fanfare feeling strangely dissonant against the quiet reality of his father's hospital bed. He flicked off the set and returned to the hallway. It was afternoon when the doctor's footsteps approached again. Dr. Mitchell's precise stride slowed as she met his gaze. "Your father's tests show promising indicators. He may be transferred out of ICU by tomorrow, unless complications arise. We'll continue to monitor closely." Relief crystallized in his chest, a solid jewel against thin glass. He nodded, pain and joy mingling in equal measure. "Thank you," he said simply, bowing his head briefly before he returned to his father's room. When he slipped the door open, the machines no longer sounded frantic but whisper-soft. He pulled up a chair, brushing a gloved hand against his father's wrist. "The paparazzi are camped outside," he murmured with a half-smile. "But I'm not trading this moment for any headline." His father's eyelids fluttered once, then settled. John held that breath, then spoke of simpler things. His latest script read, the next chord he was learning on guitar, a dessert he promised they'd share when he got home. Conversation, however one-sided, felt like stitches woven between two heartbeats. It reminded him that healing isn't only physical. It's the echo of shared laughter, familiar words, and silent companionship. Later that evening, a small circle of family, his mother, sister, wife, gathered in the hospital lobby, sharing memories of burnt pancakes and homemade school play costumes. Laughter wove warmth through lingering anxiety. John realized vulnerability could be a strength, deepening bonds rather than exposing weakness. He stood, straightening his jacket, aware that tomorrow cameras would capture his every move and fans would flood social media with prayers. But tonight, he would keep vigil, resting near his father's bedside. Life's script paused between worry and hope. And when dawn came, he would step back into the world carrying a simple truth. Even the brightest lights dim before quiet, intimate moments of grace. He felt truly ready to be. Why the third day, the hospital wing settled into a quieter rhythm. The initial frenzy of ambulances and rushing scrubs had given way to measured rounds and whispered updates. John Stamos found himself pacing less, choosing instead to station at his father's side, reading scripts between heart monitor beeps and jotting notes on filming schedules in the margins of hospital forms. When word leaked that the star had returned to the ICU corridor, cameras and phones reappeared just outside the automatic glass doors. A small army of paparazzi, fans holding prayer candles, local reporters hungry for sight of his trademark grin. Yet John refused to play to the lenses. He stepped out only when duty called, addressing supporters with gratitude but steering clear of sensational commentary. "My dad is a fighter," he said, voice raw but resolute. "We're taking it step by step." Behind those few words lay an unspoken promise, truth over tabloids. Between those public moments, John navigated a surreal duality. Cameras documented his cautious strides through hospital corridors even as he texted his agent about resuming filming on set. He rescheduled afternoon shoot days, asking producers to adjust call times around angiogram appointments and physical therapy sessions. Every email felt like juggling scripts and heartbeats, scheduling conflict on one tab, medical jargon on the next. It was the most intense audition of his life, but he refused to flinch. He realized that his real role was not Uncle Jesse, but a son stepping into uncharted territory. Caretaker, advocate, and unwavering support for the man who once chaperoned him through every callback and premiere. Late that afternoon, a physical therapist guided his father through gentle movements. John watched, elbows resting on railings as his father strained to lift an arm or flex a leg. Each tiny victory, a hand gripping the railing one more inch, a bending knee during a supportive pivot, elicited a quiet cheer from John. The man who once applauded his son's every on-screen triumph now celebrated each measured motion in a hospital gown. Those small physical tests, captured through the lens of a medical chart instead of a production camera, felt infinitely more poignant. They represented endurance, humility, and the fragile beauty of human strength. John snapped a candid selfie, shy smile, father gently flexing, then deleted it. Some stories, he knew, belonged to the heart, not the headlines. As evening approached, he slipped off his hospital-issue scrubs and changed into his casual navy sweater, ready for a livestream update to fans. He set up a simple backdrop, a softly lit corner of the family living room now converted into a makeshift press station. Joined by his mother, he pressed record on his phone. "Hey everyone," he greeted, composure intact. "We wanted to share a quick update. Dad is on the mend. He's showing remarkable resilience, and the medical team is thrilled with his progress." He smiled warmly, glancing at his mom, who placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for all the prayers and kind messages. They've made a real difference." After the live stream ended, he reflected on how vulnerability had become his greatest ally. Gone were the perfect lines and choreographed smiles. What resonated now was raw authenticity. Fans flooded comments with heart emojis, racing to express relief and admiration. His social media phone buzzed, an echo of collective empathy lighting up notification screens worldwide. John recognized that compassion, more than any scripted performance, had the power to unite people across continents. It was a lesson first taught by his father's gentle wisdom, that empathy heals faster than any catchphrase. And so, even as he returned to set the next morning, he did so carrying grace in his pocket and gratitude in his voice. In the quiet hours before dawn, he scribbled a letter to his father, a tribute he planned to read aloud in private. He thanked him for the countless moments of guidance, for teaching him the value of authenticity over applause. He told him that each day spent fighting was a lesson in grace, and every step toward recovery a testament to shared resilience. Folded at the bottom, he added a single line: "I'll carry your courage into every role I play." By the fifth morning, the rhythm of hospital life felt almost familiar. John arrived to find his father reclining in a wheelchair, alert eyes tracking the sunlight that filtered through blinds and slow bars. Physical therapy had progressed enough that the doctors deemed him fit for a brief excursion outside the ICU wing. John guided him toward the glass doors, where the cool spring air whispered through a cracked open window. His father inhaled deeply, a soft smile forming as though tasting freedom in the faint breeze. That simple gesture, oxygen mask set aside, brittle fingers wrapped around John's, felt more triumphant than any standing ovation under studio lights. A nearby nurse captured the moment discreetly on her phone before lowering it respectfully. She offered a thumbs up and a quiet nod, sharing a wordless celebration of human resilience. John leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to his father's forehead. "You're doing amazing," he whispered. "Today feels like a new chapter." His father's smile deepened, offering a flicker of his old pep, the same grin he wore behind a camera at his son's first taping of Full House. Back in the family lounge, John poured 2 cups of coffee, one black for himself, one with a dash of cream for his father. They settled near a sliding window that overlooked a courtyard trimmed with lavender and orange trees. John passed his father a cup, cradling his own hands around the warm mug as though drawing courage from its heat. They sat in companionable silence, broken only by distant bird calls and the occasional murmur of passing staff. In that quiet, John realized how rare it was to experience life without scripted lines or deadlines, a rare gift of unscripted connection. Later that afternoon, John stepped onto a small makeshift stage outside the hospital for a live stream Q&A. The phrase "heartbreaking news for John Stamos" had been replaced by a new headline: "Full House star shares gratitude after father's recovery." He glanced at the camera, chin lifted, eyes steady as he began. "Hey everyone. I wanted to give you a quick update. My dad's doing so much better." He even went for a stroll in the courtyard today, which felt like a lifeline for both of us. He spoke warmly, pausing to sip from a water bottle he held. Behind him, a banner decorated with hand-drawn cards from fans fluttered in the breeze. Messages like "Stay strong," "We love you," and "Family first." Each card, bound with ribbon, testified to a shared humanity he never imagined phones and social media might nurture. John navigated each question with honesty. Yes, filming will resume next week, he said, smiling wryly at a question about scheduling conflicts. But trust me, no production deadline compares to moments like these. He fielded a light-hearted request from a fan to send a signed guitar pick to a charity auction, then shifted tone gently for a more serious note. I've learned that life's fragility is powerful. If you have loved ones in your life, tell them today. Don't wait for a hospital door to remind you of what matters. After the stream ended, he returned to the private room where hospital volunteers had arranged a small celebration. Balloons and a fruit basket signaled his father's impending transfer to a regular ward. Cheerful staff brought a tiny cake with the words, "Good job, Mr. Stamos," iced in blue. His father blew out the single candle with theatrical flair, prompting laughter that echoed through brightened windows. John caught that laughter on camera, pressing record on his phone and capturing the moment as a personal memento. In that shared joy, he saw how a heartbreak headline had transformed into a story of renewed hope. By dusk, nurses wheeled his father back to his room. The corridor lights dimmed in quiet respect. John helped him settle back into bed, adjusting pillows so he'd face the window as the sun sank below the rooftops. He placed a hand on his chest and one on his father's, letting his heart speak wordlessly in steady thumps. He whispered, "Tonight, we rest. Tomorrow, we go home." That evening, John drafted the final public statement. "Dad's recovery continues beautifully, and we plan to bring him home soon. Thank you for your love and kindness. We're forever grateful." He sent it into the world at midnight, then sat by his father's bedside until sleep claimed him both. In the hush that follows a chapter's close, he felt the weight of every headline lifted. The real story, the one he'd lived, was about ordinary grace, unscripted love, and the quiet triumph of a father and son reunited.